Sarah Winters stood on David Miller's doorstep at 11 p.m., rain soaking through her expensive silk blouse, her long blonde hair plastered to her face. She wasn't supposed to be here, not as his boss, not as the untouchable CEO of Meridian Technologies, and certainly not as a woman with only months left to live. But the doctor's words echoed in her mind, 6 months, maybe less. 3 of those months had already slipped away while she maintained her perfect facade at the office. "Am I beautiful?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. David froze, one hand still on the door he'd just opened. His boss, the woman whose approval he'd sought for 4 years, whose respect he'd earned through countless late nights and brilliant marketing campaigns, was standing at his apartment, asking a question that crossed every professional boundary they'd established. "I like you," he replied simply, immediately regretting the inadequacy of his response. Before he could elaborate, Sarah's phone rang. The hospital. Her expression changed instantly as she answered, and David watched her face crumple. "They found something new on the scan," she whispered, ending the call. "Something they missed before." David stepped back, inviting her inside, away from the rain and prying eyes of neighbors. His apartment was modest but warm, nothing like the sleek penthouse he imagined she lived in. Sarah stood awkwardly in his living room, water pooling beneath her expensive shoes. "I shouldn't have come," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "This was inappropriate." "Why are you here, Sarah?" David asked, noticing how strange her name felt on his tongue after years of calling her Ms. Winters at the office. She looked at him directly, her blue eyes intense. "Because I'm running out of time, to be honest. And I've been watching you for 4 years, wondering what it would be like if we weren't boss and employee." The revelation stunned him. Sarah Winters, the woman who could have anyone, was interested in him? It seemed impossible, yet here she was, dripping rainwater onto his hardwood floor. "The hospital called because they found something unexpected," she continued. "Not worse news, better. A specialist thinks my condition might be treatable with an experimental procedure. But the odds aren't great, and I needed to see you before I make my decision." "Why me?" David's mind raced with questions. "Because you're the only person who's never asked anything of me," she said. "Everyone wants something from Sarah Winters, CEO. But you just do brilliant work and make me laugh with those notes you leave in the margins of reports." "You noticed those?" he asked, surprised. "I've kept every one," she admitted. As they talked into the night, David learned the truth. Sarah had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition 3 months ago. The experimental treatment offered a 40% chance of recovery but required her to step away from the company for a year, the company that had been her entire identity. The board was already circling, led by Victor Harmon, her ambitious CFO who had been undermining her for years, waiting for any sign of weakness. "If I take this treatment and it fails, I lose everything I've built," she confessed. "If I don't try, I have maybe 3 months left to secure my legacy." "And what do you want that legacy to be?" David asked. Sarah's answer was interrupted by a crash outside. They rushed to the window to see a car speeding away and Sarah's driver slumped over the wheel of her town car, unconscious. David called 911 while Sarah ran outside despite his protests. As she checked on her driver, a second car's headlights flared to life down the street. "Sarah, get back inside!" David shouted, but his warning came too late. The car accelerated toward her. In that moment, David did the only thing he could. He ran into the street and pulled Sarah out of the car's path, both of them tumbling onto the wet grass as the vehicle sped past, close enough that they felt the rush of air. The driver's face was obscured, but Sarah caught a glimpse of something familiar on the dashboard. "That was Victor's car," she gasped, her body trembling against David's. "He knows I'm here." The police arrived minutes later, but the damage was done. Sarah's presence at her employee's home late at night would be impossible to explain away. especially to a board already looking for reasons to question her judgment. And now it seemed Victor was willing to go to extreme lengths to accelerate her removal. "You need to come with me," David said once the police had taken statements and an ambulance had taken her injured driver away. "My sister has a cabin upstate. No one knows about it. You'll be safe there while we figure this out." "We?" Sarah asked, her professional mask slipping back into place. "This isn't your problem, David. You made it my problem when you asked if you were beautiful," he replied with unexpected firmness. "I'm not letting you face this alone." The drive to the cabin took 3 hours, during which Sarah received increasingly alarming texts from her assistant. Victor had called an emergency board meeting for the morning. Somehow, he already knew about her condition, information only her doctor should have had access to. The pieces were falling into place: the medical records breach, the attack on her driver, Victor's convenient appearance at David Street. This wasn't opportunism, it was a calculated plan. "Why didn't you just tell the board about your diagnosis?" David asked as they pulled up to the rustic cabin nestled among pine trees. "Because Meridian is developing technology that could revolutionize cardiac care," Sarah explained. "If Victor takes over, he'll sell it to the highest bidder instead of making it accessible to everyone. That's been our fight for years, profit versus purpose." Inside the cabin, with a fire crackling and mugs of tea warming their hands, the professional boundaries between them continued to dissolve. David saw for the first time the weight Sarah carried. Not just her illness, but the responsibility for thousands of employees, for technology that could save lives. "You know, you never really answered my question," Sarah said softly as midnight approached. "Which one? Am I beautiful?" David looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect composure she maintained at work was gone, her long hair falling in damp waves around her shoulders, her makeup faded. She looked exhausted and worried and completely human. "You're the most beautiful person I've ever known," he said honestly. "Not because of how you look, though that's certainly not a hardship to admire. You're beautiful because of how your mind works, how you fight for what matters, how you've never taken the easy path when the right one was harder." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've spent my whole life being strong. I don't know how to be this person, scared, uncertain." "Maybe you don't have to be strong all the time," David suggested. "Maybe sometimes you can just be Sarah." Their conversation was interrupted by David's phone ringing, his sister, calling with alarming news. Someone had been asking questions about the cabin in town. They weren't safe there either. "We need to leave," David said, already gathering their things. "But first, I need to show you something." He opened his laptop and pulled up files he'd been working on for months. Marketing plans for Meridian's cardiac technology that emphasized accessibility over profit, complete with projected financials showing how the company could thrive while still fulfilling Sarah's vision. "I've been developing this in my spare time," he explained. "I believe in what you're trying to do. And I think I can help you convince the board that Victor's approach will ultimately damage the company's reputation and long-term value." Sarah stared at the screen, then at David. "You did this without being asked?" "I did it because I believe in you," he said simply. In that moment, with danger closing in and her future uncertain, Sarah did something completely unprofessional: she kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of gratitude or desperation, but one of recognition, of finding something unexpected and precious. They left the cabin before dawn, driving back toward the city with a plan forming between them. Sarah would face the board, reveal her condition on her own terms, and present David's strategy as the path forward during her treatment. But first, they needed evidence of Victor's betrayal. What they didn't know was that Victor had already anticipated their return. As they pulled into the underground parking garage of Meridian's headquarters, Sarah's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number: "Check your email before you go upstairs." The attached video showed Victor meeting with Sarah's doctor, cash changing hands. The sender remained anonymous, but the message was clear: someone else in the company was on their side. Armed with this evidence and David's strategic plan, Sarah walked into the boardroom that morning not as a woman weakened by illness, but as a leader with a clear vision for the company's future. The confrontation with Victor became the stuff of corporate legend. His shocked face when she played the video, his desperate attempts to explain, the board's unanimous vote to remove him. "You think this is over?" Victor hissed as security escorted him from the building. "This company will crumble without me. And you won't live to see what happens next." His threat hung in the air, but Sarah stood firm, David by her side. The board appointed David as interim chief strategy officer, a position created to support Sarah during her treatment and ensure Meridian's cardiac technology reached the market as she envisioned, accessible to all, not just the wealthy. 2 weeks later, Sarah began her experimental treatment at New York's leading cardiac center. The prognosis remained uncertain, but something else had become wonderfully clear. What had started on a rainy night on David's doorstep had blossomed into something neither of them had expected to find so late in life, a partnership of equals, built on respect, shared purpose, and yes, love. The treatment was brutal. Sarah's body fought the experimental drugs, her strength diminishing with each passing week. David visited daily, bringing work updates, fresh flowers, and his unwavering belief in her recovery. The board remained supportive, impressed by David's leadership and the progress of their cardiac technology. But Victor hadn't disappeared. Reports surfaced that he'd joined Helix Pharmaceuticals, Meridian's biggest competitor in the cardiac care space. Rumors circulated about patent challenges, attempts to poach key researchers, and suspicious activity around Meridian's secure servers. "He's trying to steal our research," Sarah said weakly from her hospital bed, 6 weeks into treatment. "If Helix gets our technology, they'll price it beyond reach for most patients." "Let me worry about Victor," David insisted. "You focus on getting better." But Sarah Winters hadn't built a tech empire by letting others fight her battles. Against medical advice, she began working from her hospital room, coordinating with Meridian's head of cybersecurity, Eliza Chen, to protect their intellectual property. "You're pushing yourself too hard," David warned after finding her on a video call at midnight, her face pale with exhaustion. "I don't have the luxury of time," she reminded him. "The doctors say the treatment is working, but slowly. Victor won't wait for me to recover." Their fears proved justified when Eliza uncovered evidence that Victor was orchestrating a hostile takeover attempt, working with Helix to acquire Meridian at a fraction of its value while Sarah was incapacitated. The plan included planting stories about Sarah's deteriorating health to drive down stock prices and scare off investors. "We need to go public with what we know," David argued during a strategy session in Sarah's hospital room. The medical equipment beeped steadily in the background, a constant reminder of what was at stake. "Not yet," Sarah countered. "If we reveal what we know, Victor will just change tactics. We need to catch him red-handed." The opportunity came 3 months into Sarah's treatment, when Victor approached a key board member with insider information and a substantial bribe. What Victor didn't know was that the board member was working with Sarah and David, recording every word of his illegal proposition. The evidence was damning: corporate espionage, attempted bribery, theft of medical records. The FBI became involved, and Victor was arrested leaving a meeting with Helix executives. The scandal rocked the pharmaceutical industry, with Helix's stock plummeting as their involvement in the scheme came to light. For Sarah, the victory was bittersweet. The stress of the confrontation had taken its toll, setting back her treatment progress. Her doctors expressed concern about her heart's ability to withstand both the aggressive medication and the emotional strain. "You need to step back," David insisted, holding her hand as she lay exhausted after another round of treatment. "The company is safe. Victor is facing federal charges. Let me handle things while you focus on healing." "I don't know how to let go," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Meridian has been my life for so long." "Maybe that's the problem," David suggested gently. Maybe there's more to life than Meridian. Maybe there's us. The word hung between them, us. Not boss and employee, not even colleagues, but something more profound. Something worth fighting for beyond corporate battles and market share. I'm scared, Sarah confessed, a rare admission from a woman known for her fearlessness. Not of dying, but of living differently. Of being vulnerable. Of needing someone. I'm scared too, David replied. Scared of losing you before we've had a chance to discover what we could be together. That night, Sarah made a decision that shocked the business world but felt right in her heart. She announced a temporary leave of absence from Meridian, appointing David as acting CEO while she focused entirely on her recovery. The board unanimously approved, impressed by his leadership during the crisis with Victor and Helix. 6 more months of treatment followed, months of uncertainty, small victories, and setbacks. David balanced running Meridian with supporting Sarah, often working from her hospital room or the apartment he'd rented nearby. Their relationship deepened beyond the initial attraction, built on shared values, mutual respect, and the kind of honesty that only comes when facing mortality together. The breakthrough came in the 8th month. Sarah's doctors reported significant improvement in her heart function, enough to classify her as responding to the treatment. The odds had been in the minority, but Sarah Winters had spent her life defying odds. We're cautiously optimistic, Dr. Reynolds told them during a follow-up appointment. The tissue regeneration is exceeding our expectations. If this continues, you could make a full recovery. That evening, David took Sarah to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the hospital, her first real outing in months. She wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, her hair shorter now but growing back after the treatments, her face thinner but glowing with renewed hope. To beating the odds, David toasted, raising his glass of wine. To finding something worth fighting for, Sarah countered, clinking her glass against his. As they finished dinner, Sarah reached across the table for David's hand. You never did give me a straight answer that night, she said. Which night? The night I showed up at your door and asked if I was beautiful. David smiled, remembering. I said I liked you, which was the understatement of the century. And now? She asked, her eyes searching his. Now I'd say you're beautiful, brilliant, and the best thing that's ever happened to me, he replied. And I'd really like to see where this story goes next. Sarah squeezed his hand. So would I. 1 year after that rainy night on David's doorstep, Meridian's revolutionary cardiac technology received FDA approval. True to Sarah's vision, the company implemented a tiered pricing structure that made the treatment accessible to patients regardless of income level. The success was unprecedented, with hospitals around the world adopting the technology and saving countless lives. Sarah returned to Meridian as CEO, with David continuing as Chief Strategy Officer, a partnership that transformed the company and the industry. Their personal relationship remained private but not secret, a love story that had begun with an unexpected question and blossomed through the most challenging circumstances. You know what I've learned through all this? Sarah said one evening as they stood on the balcony of her apartment, overlooking the city lights. That the most valuable things in life aren't things at all. They're moments of connection, of courage, of choosing love over fear. Is that the famous Sarah Winters getting philosophical? David teased, wrapping his arms around her from behind. It's the new Sarah Winters, she corrected. The one who knows that being strong sometimes means admitting when you need someone. The one who understands that true beauty isn't about appearance, but about how you touch other people's lives. David turned her to face him. I like the old Sarah Winters, he said softly. But I love this one. Their story. Of finding love when least expected, of fighting for what matters, of second chances, became one they shared often in the years that followed. Sometimes the most meaningful connections come when we're brave enough to ask difficult questions and honest enough to answer them, even if the timing seems impossible. Sometimes, I like you is just the beginning of a much longer, more beautiful story. If you've enjoyed this journey of unexpected love and courage, consider sharing your own stories of second chances in the comments below. After all, the most powerful tales are the ones that remind us it's never too late for a new beginning.